Good morning. It is good to see everybody out this morning. I was thinking as I was sitting down in preparation to come speak with you, that as I look out, this is probably the largest crowd we've had since the pandemic had started. So it is an encouraging thing for so many reasons to look out and to see many faces, and we're thankful for that. We're thankful for your attendance this morning. As has been said, Jim is away, so I am come to do what we can to replace him, at least for a Sunday. So we're thankful for your attendance. Also, as Mike had mentioned, as we think about this morning and the holiday, certainly first and foremost to our lives is the Memorial Day. Not tomorrow, but the memorial of our Savior Jesus Christ, which recognizes the death, burial, and resurrection. And that certainly, as it comes to the significance in everybody's lives, not only in the United States, but throughout the world, it certainly is a significant event. And we honor that, and we remember that each Lord's Day. But also, this weekend, tomorrow is what our nation remembers as a Memorial Day for those that have died in service to our country. And though today the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ, that memorial reigns supreme because it gave us the freedom from sin, it still is a significant thing to realize that there are men and women over the years that have died to give us the freedom to worship. So we never want to neglect that or forget that, and our country certainly recognizes that on this holiday weekend. As tomorrow is the official Memorial Day, this weekend is in many ways the unofficial start of summer. You hear that all the time, that Memorial Day weekend is the unofficial start of summer. It won't be until June that summer actually starts, but in our minds, oftentimes we think of Memorial Day as when summer kicks off. Kids are out of school, seasons change, the days get longer and brighter, and it becomes the unofficial beginning of summer. And with that, it becomes the unofficial or the official vacation season. And maybe some of you are thinking about what you're going to do this summer for vacation. It begins, the weather improves, and it makes us to dream about what our dream vacation is and where we're going to spend it. And maybe you're already there. Maybe that's what brought you here this morning. And your dream vacation may be many different things. It's different things to different people. Maybe your dream vacation is a secluded beach. Maybe it's a cabin in the mountains. Maybe it's a house on the lake. Maybe it's more active. Maybe your dream vacation is an active adventure, Disney World, or whatever it may be, sightseeing. Whatever it is, whatever your dream vacation is, those people in the know, those psychologists that know how we are wired, tell us, and it's a known fact, that vacations are good for us. It's good to get away and to interrupt your regular routine. I ran across an article recently, and it was from a magazine, Maxima Magazine, and it listed 6 benefits of vacation. Now, I started thinking about this. I got more than 6. I got 10, 12. I could keep going. But the magazine only had 6. And it boiled down the benefits of vacation into 6 different things. And the first thing it said was, it is beneficial to take a vacation because it gives you a new perspective on things. Maybe it broadens your horizons, like we think about that. We experience new things that maybe we aren't aware of. We see new things. That's a benefit of vacation. Another benefit of taking a vacation is that it helps us, it improves our physical health. You know, especially if we're still in the workforce, we get worn down day after day after day. And it's a healthy thing physically to take a vacation. It also improves our mental health to get away. to stop the routine for just a little while, to recharge that battery. The article also said that the benefits of vacation, and it helps you reconnect with family and friends. You take family vacations, you realize that really is a good time to do that. All day spent with your family. And some people might cringe at that, but if you think about it, a vacation is a good time to reconnect and reestablish relationships. And then after that vacation, you realize the vacation, the benefits still go on, because when you get back into your everyday walk of life, experts say that we're more productive in our workforce. We're more able to get things done. And finally, the last benefit is you appreciate things more when you come back to your regular day, to your regular process. So 6 benefits of taking vacation. Now, we're not here to talk about carnal things. So I wanted to refine that question, or wanted to refine that idea of vacation and 6 benefits of vacation. And what I want to do this morning is look at 6 benefits of attending worship services while you're on vacation. We all know the benefits of vacation, but I want to suggest to you that there are many benefits, and again, there are more than 6. But if we spend them all, if we talked about all the benefits of attending services on vacation, Larry would get the hook out and he'd pull me off the podium, because it would take forever to go through all the benefits. So we boiled it down to just 6 this morning. And no matter what your dream is, what your dream vacation is, if it's a secluded beach, if it's a cabin in the mountain, if it's an active adventure, whatever it is, I want to study the benefits of making attending church services, we might say, your vacation destination. When we think about going to services while we're away. I'm not going to bombard you with a lot of scriptures, but I want to look at this in a few ways, and I want to understand this also before we really get into the meat of the lesson. This lesson is not applicable only to the traditional week-long vacation that you may go on, but you can make application of this if you're away for business, if you're traveling, a holiday weekend. Appreciate those that have come this holiday weekend. Special events, you go away for whatever it is. We can make application to the benefits of attending services away. So I encourage you to think about the spiritual benefits of going to services while we're away from home. Let's look at that. Let's look at 6 things. There were 6 benefits of vacation. I would suggest we're going to look at 6 benefits of attending services while we're on vacation. First of all, the most obvious benefit is we can worship. And why do we bring that up? I want you to think about this for a minute, because I know where I grew up and many of the family and friends, when we think about what worship is, we often view our worship as something that is done in a specific location with a specific group of people at a specific time. And we're not criticizing that, because by and large, our service is a specific act at a specific time, at a specific place, at a specific location, with a close-knit community. But some of us may have difficulty seeing that worship is essential to our lives. It's an essential part of our lives wherever we are. And what I'm suggesting is, when we're away attending services, we can worship. You know, maybe there's probably a lot of reasons, but maybe we don't worship when we're traveling because we just don't know anybody in the area. We don't know where to start. We don't know how to begin. And if we would go in that door, maybe they're just not doing things right. You ever had that feeling? We've walked in places on vacation that made us turn around. Maybe that's why we just don't even try it. Maybe our attitude is, well, I'm on vacation. Maybe our attitude is, well, whatever I'm here for, whatever reason that brought me here is more important than worship. We might not say that openly, but maybe that's what we think. Perhaps we're subconsciously think that we can only worship here. In John chapter 4, We want to look at an instance of a woman at the well, at Jacob's well. And Christ had a long conversation with this woman about, water, and you didn't bring any vessel to put it in. And he was talking about a different type of water. And she had a conversation with Christ about that. It was a Samaritan woman, had a conversation about water and drinking of the well. And then Christ revealed unto her that he knew a lot about her background, about her husband, her husbands. And then she began to realize that she recognized him as something special. And in John chapter 4, what the passage we want to look at, then they began to talk about worship. In John chapter 4, I want to start in around verse 20. In verse 19, the woman said, "Hey, I perceive that you're a prophet. You're something different." In verse 20, "Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and ye say that in Jerusalem is a place where men ought to worship." And then Jesus said unto her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is cometh when ye shall neither in this mountain nor yet in Jerusalem worship the Father. Ye worship, ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshiper shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father seeketh such to worship. God is spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and truth." What are we seeing here? The woman in Samaria, the Samaritan woman, says to Christ, "I got a problem. There's a question here." She says, "Our fathers said that we need to worship in this mountain." And if you know about the Samaritans, they had built a temple in the Mount Gerizim that was much like the temple at Jerusalem. And their leaders said, "You Samaritans, you worship here at Mount Gerizim." And she's saying, "Our fathers, our leaders are saying worship here, but you Jews, you're saying you worship at Jerusalem. Now, which is it?" And the great lesson here is Christ says it doesn't matter anymore. There's going to be a time, and now is, that you can worship anywhere. You are not constrained to worship at one place or the other. The lesson this morning is we are not constrained to worship here only at East Cambridge. If you're from East Cambridge, if you're from Middlebourne, you're not constrained to worship at Middlebourne only. That's what Christ is teaching. We need to make that application to our everyday lives. It was Paul's customs when he went into a city to first visit the synagogue and then assemble with the saints. So we can worship when we're on vacation, and obviously, the next step of that, in an act, we call it the acts of worship, right? The 5 acts of worship you hear about. Another element of our worship is partaking of the communion like we did this morning. In Acts chapter 2 and verse 42, it is evident that the early church, that surrounding the table and partaking of the emblems was critical in their worship. Now here they were in Jerusalem, but about 10 chapters later, they're going to be scattered abroad. And they're going to do it everywhere. And in Acts chapter 2, they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship and breaking of bread and in prayers. There is overwhelming evidence that the early church practiced worship upon the first day of the week, no matter where they were at. In 1 Corinthians chapter 11, 20, we won't turn to it, but if you remember, Paul is condemning them. He says, when ye come together, you're not doing it because you're coming together for the Lord's table. But they were having their own common meal. They made a common meal at the Lord's table. And what Paul is saying is, you should be coming together for that purpose. Specific reason to regularly meet. Look at Acts chapter 20. You know, Acts chapter 20 is a passage that we look at to establish the day and the frequency at which we partake of the Lord's table, right? Acts chapter 20 and verse 7. We think about that all the time. We use that oftentimes in restating and providing authority for the Lord's table every first day of the week. Acts chapter 20 is the account of Paul. Luke is writing about Paul's journey, and he's on his third missionary journey. He just left the city of Philippi. He ends up in the city of Troas, and he's going to go on and eventually meet the Ephesian brethren at Miletus, and then he's going to go home to Jerusalem. So that's the stage. That's what we're seeing here in Acts chapter 20, verse 7. Paul's on his way home. Now, you might say it was a vacation that he was on. He was on a business trip. I would suggest it's more of a business trip. But he was away from home. In Acts chapter 20 and verse 6, and we sailed away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread, and came then unto Troas in 5 days, where we abode 7 days. Now, I'm pretty good at math, but I think everybody can understand this. 7 days he was there. There had to be a Sunday in there. Figure it out. There had to be a Sunday, 7 days, at least one Sunday. Could have been two if he was there 7 full days, right? But he was there on the Lord's day. He was traveling on the Lord's day. What did he do while he was traveling away from home on the Lord's day? Verse 7. And upon the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread, that's what we do, Paul preached unto them ready to depart on the morrow, and continued his speech till midnight. Paul assembled with the saints at Troas. He wasn't a member there, but he was traveling through, and it was the first day of the week, and he made sure to be with them. And he preached. I'm not suggesting everybody that when you go away on vacation and you're there that you preach. But attending service, that was Paul. That's what he did. Shouldn't that be, that's a Christian, that's what we should do. I would encourage you that that's a benefit. We're going to keep going. Benefit number 2. I would suggest to you that when you go on vacation and you attend a service of another group of saints, you begin to experience the universal nature of the church. I came up with that, so I'll explain what that means. The universal nature of the church. Sometimes we fail to see that the gospel is the same everywhere. And it's astounding, isn't it? That though there be no earthly organization, there be no headquarters in Rome or Salt Lake City or Nashville, Tennessee, no matter what we say, there's no earthly headquarters for the church. But it is the same. And that alone, when you walk into a gospel meeting, or you walk into a church service of the Lord's people, and you see the similarities, it shows you the wisdom and the providence of God to realize that the church is universal. Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 8, it's a verse you're familiar with. The scripture says Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. And that's all true. I would suggest to you this, without harming the scriptures, we can say this: the truth, the doctrine, the same here, the same there, and the same everywhere. The same at East Cambridge, the same at Eddie's Ridge, the same at Middlebourne. Everywhere is the truth. And unless we go out and experience that, we don't really understand or appreciate the wisdom of God, knowing that that without earthly intervention, that the word is the same. Sure, there are cultural differences when you attend somewhere else. You'll recognize those cultural differences. But if it's a true church that Christ died for, if it's a true Lord's church, the truth will be there. The truth travels. I've been fortunate, Kim and I and our family have been fortunate to do a lot of traveling, and I know many here have also. I mean, I think about assembling with saints in Florida, and we went to, there's a congregation in Washington, there's a congregation in the Black Hills of South Dakota that some have attended at Rapid City. And when you go to those places, we were in a congregation in Allentown, Pennsylvania, that they'd converted somebody's garage to a meeting place, and we attended there. And it felt, I wouldn't say eerily comfortable, but it felt so comfortable knowing that it was simply church services. Even overseas, I've been blessed. In Italy, I was at the church right outside of Venice, Padua, the city, and a guy, his mother couldn't speak English, but he could. He asked me over for lunch after that. I was at the church at Rome. You know, Paul wrote a letter to that church. Zach and I and Ben, when we were over there last, we went to the church at Pisa. And Zach had gotten to know the preacher there, Arrigo. And it was heartwarming to know that those things were common. The church, the word, the truth is the same everywhere. On this Memorial Day weekend, I'll tell you a little story. I started for a trip we were planning. We thought we were going to be in a city called around Verviers, Belgium. So I started making contact and looking for a congregation there, and there is a congregation there, and the gentleman there explained to me how the congregation at Verviers, Belgium started. He said back during the war, and this is applicable because of Memorial Day weekend, he said during the war a USGI had shared the truth in that community. And it had taken root and it had sprung forth, and now there is a congregation of the Lord's Church there, and the gentleman, he's elderly now, he's in his 80s, upper 80s, still preaching the truth. He has a younger son that preaches in France. You experience the universal nature of the church if you get out and you visit while attending other places. And we talk to people that have done mission work, that have more experience than I have, but it is astounding what you learn and how you are encouraged when you do that. Benefit number 3, you learn from different styles of teaching. You know that there are different styles of learning. If you just watch people and you think about your family, you'll realize that, right? People learn in different ways. Some people are visual learners. They have to watch it, right? Some people are auditory learners. They have to hear it. Some people are verbal learners. They have to say it. They have to speak it to be able to learn. Some people are hands-on. They have to do. Some people are social. They have to be with people. Some people are solitary. They work best. They learn best alone. We all know that. When we go out and we experience different learning methods, different methods of teaching, it helps us to expand our understanding. Even in terms of methods of teaching, there's different medium to teach. You know, it used to be the blackboard. Some of you here are old enough to remember, I'm not, Larry is, old enough to remember I'm picking on Larry, Fred Dennis and his bedsheet sermons. I've heard about those. That was a different medium. Now, maybe it didn't connect with some people, but maybe it did with others. Blackboards, PowerPoints. And I know and I recognize that the PowerPoints are difficult, more embraced by some than others. But we all work through that. You know, when we were on the pandemic, when we were suspended for services, we tried something on Wednesday evenings, like an online virtual Bible study. So there's all sorts of ways. Different ways to learn, different medium to teach. And I would suggest to you, there's different methods of teaching, not right or wrong. Now certainly you can teach a lie, but you can teach and preach the truth in a lot of different ways. And to some, it's more effective than others. And until you go out and experience other ways to learn and other ways to teach, you're doing yourself a disservice. Example, the Apostle Paul. You think about the Apostle Paul. He was a very learned man. He was a very technical man. Peter even said, I think in his second epistle, about chapter 3 and verse 16, Peter said, Paul says a lot of things that are hard to understand. He was a high-level thinker. He took the Old Testament, he took the prophets of the Old Testament, and he showed and translated that into Christ, and even into the way that the Jews were conducting their lives in the days of Christ. That was Paul, educated household of Gamaliel, a Pharisee. He was a different type of teacher. Just mentioned Peter. Peter was a different type of teacher. He was more common, wasn't he? When you read Peter's writings, not technical, had a down-to-earth approach. He was a fisherman. He knew down-to-earth how to teach the truth. And then there's a man named Stephen. In Acts chapter 7, you think Stephen was preaching too, and he had his own method. Acts chapter 7, we can say nothing more than Stephen was very direct in his approach. He was an old fire and brimstone preacher. In verses 51 through 53 of Acts chapter 7, he says, "Ye stiff-necked and uncircumcised in heart and ears, and ye do always resist the Holy Ghost, even as your fathers did. Which of the prophets have not your fathers persecuted, and they have slain them which have showed before of the coming of the just one, of whom ye have been now the betrayer and murderers, who have received the law by disposition of angels and have not kept it." You say that today to people, half of them will walk out. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong, because maybe the other half will get it. Maybe that'll affect the other half. That's a different way. It's not wrong. It's a different method. When you go out and experience different teaching, different methods, different presentations, different approaches, different styles, maybe there's something that'll click. You know, it's nothing against Mike. It's nothing. You perked up, didn't you? It's nothing against Mike. It's nothing against Jim. But even Christ said, what he said, that a prophet is not without honor except in his own country by his own kin. I think part of that is we get used to something. We take something for granted. We hear it again and again and again. It's good to get out. That's why I only preach once a month anywhere I go. So people don't get tired of me, right? If I did it every time, every Sunday, it was like, but it's good to have something in a different way. Maybe you hear the same truth in a different way. We're going to keep going. Benefit number 4, we are edified. Worship strengthens you wherever you are. You don't have to be strengthened just here at East Cambridge or wherever your home congregation is. You are strengthened spiritually whenever you come together with the Lord's people. In 1 Corinthians chapter 16 and verses 15 through 18, 1 Corinthians 16, 15 through 18, he says, "I beseech you, brethren, ye know the house of Stephanas, that in the first fruits of Achaia, and that they have addicted themselves to the ministry of the saints, that ye submit yourselves unto such, and to every one that helpeth with us and laboreth." He says, "I am glad of the coming of Stephanas and Fortunus and Achaeus, for that which was lacking on your part they have supplied." Here he's talking about getting together and being encouraged. I'm suggesting to you that when you go out, wherever you're at, you'll feel better and you'll be uplifted by attending services. What is another benefit? You are not only edified, you are not only benefited, but those that you attend with, the congregation that you attend, you are an encouragement to them. If we stay with 1 Corinthians chapter 16, that's what he's saying. Paul is saying, I am glad of the coming of Stephanas. He was uplifted by Stephanas and Fortunus and Achaeus. For that which was lacking on your part they have supplied. For they have refreshed my spirit and yours. Therefore acknowledge ye them that are such. Let me say something. Those that aren't of our congregation, those that are visiting with us this morning, I'll say this. You're an encouragement to us, all of you. We welcome you here. We're encouraged by your faithfulness. We're encouraged that when you are away, no matter where you're from, that upon the Lord's day you found it fit, you found it proper, you found it essential in your life to assemble and to attend with us. That's an encouragement to me. When you go and you attend somewhere else, realize this: you're attending and you're assembling and you're encouraging others. And that's what you need to be doing. That's a job of a Christian. We won't turn to it, but if you look at it in Hebrews chapter 10, we look at that in verses 20. Well, we'll look at it. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25. That is a responsibility, a duty as a Christian, is it not? To encourage others. You know, we talk about forsaking the assembling of ourselves together. Some is, you know, somebody might think, well, that's just talking about, well, I don't want to skip services because I have to partake of the Lord's table on my own, right? Well, certainly that's one of the things we saw that in benefit number 1. But what we're saying is, when we think about what the context of Hebrews chapter 10 is, and specifically verses 24 and 25, and we look at that, don't forsake the assembling. Why is it? Why is one of the reasons? Look at what it says. In verse 23 of Hebrews 10, let us hold fast the profession of our faith without wavering, for he is faithful that promised, and let us consider one another to provoke unto love and to good works. When we come together, we provoke each other. We encourage each other. And then he goes on, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves. Well, we got 2 more real quick. Benefit number 5, when we get together, when we assemble elsewhere, we provide an example for our friends and our neighbors and our family. Do as I say, not as I do, doesn't really work too well. In 1 Peter chapter 2, we see the effects of being a good example in our service. If God's important to us, He should not be only important to us when we're at home, but also when we're away. In 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 12, and others see that as well. The scripture says, having your conversations honest among the Gentiles, whereas they speak against you as evildoers, they may by your good works, the way you live, which they shall behold, glorify God in the days of visitation. People are going to learn from you. You can be a good example just simply by going and filling a pew and ordering your life while you're away. Not only to those that speak evil of you, but maybe we have an unbelieving husband, an unbelieving wife, family members that are wavering. If you fast forward into chapter 3, verse 1, likewise, ye wives, be in subjection to your own husbands, that if any obey not the word, they also may be won. Let me read that again. They also may, without the word, be won by the conversation of their wives. The way the wife conducts her life can be an influence on an unbelieving husband. And you can carry that example on to vacation and assembling while you're away. We need to talk the talk, but also walk the walk. And that's what being a good example is. Final thing. Attending services, maybe the biggest thing, attending services on vacation helps us to learn what's most important in our own lives. Take a breath. Think about where you're at. Think about what your life is. Think about what you're doing. Think about how you've ordered your life. When you're on vacation, when you're away from home on a Sunday afternoon, on a Sunday morning, you think about that and think about what's most important that day and what's most important in my life. I would suggest to you that it tells us about what's the number 1 priority in our life. Paul exhorts us to think about that, to consider it, and to learn from it. So it's really a self-evaluation. In 2 Corinthians chapter 13 verse 5, he says, examine your own selves. Know ye not your own selves, whether ye be unfit. I think King James says reprobates. In verse 5, examine your own selves, whether you be in the faith. Prove your own selves. Know ye not your own selves, how that Jesus Christ is you, except ye be reprobate. So what's he saying? Examine yourself. When you're on vacation, examine yourself. Go and attending services while we're away, no matter what it is, no matter what takes us there. I think it tells you a lot about yourself. It tells you a lot about your faith. It tells you a lot about how important service is to you. Or do you need a break from it? Do you need a break from service? That's a question you ought to ask yourself. Last thing, I don't think so because you came this morning. Appreciate your attendance. Last thing, Romans chapter 8. This is the attitude. I love this attitude. This is the attitude that we ought to have. And this is the last verse we'll look at. We're going to read a lot of things, and this passage is full of distress and difficulties and turmoils in somebody's life. Hard things to overcome. Let's read that in verse 35. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? That's what we're going to ask ourselves, right? We're going to examine our priorities. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or perils or sword? As it is written, for thy sake, we are killed all the day long. We are accounted as sheep for the slaughter. Nay, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him that loved us. He says, for I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. He talks about all these difficult distresses, and he says, they're not going to keep me away. But today, vacation keeps people away from serving God. The fun, the folly, the joy of this life overtakes our love for God. That's the attitude we ought to have. Paul says, these hardships aren't going to keep me away. Examine our priorities. And I would suggest to you going away, being away, no matter how insufficient the preacher is, like this morning, you being away and being with the Lord's people, you're going to be edified. It's going to be good for you. So, 6 reasons, benefits of attending services while you're away. First of all, you partake of the Lord's table, you assemble on the first day of the week. That's a command. That's one of the acts of worship. You do that. That's a benefit. Second of all, you begin to see how small the world really is. I love that picture I put in because it shows the world. We think it's a big world, but God holds that germ within his hand. And you see that. You see different ways to learn, different ways to teach. You're edified. You encourage others as they encourage you. You're a good example for those. You're not only talking the talk, but you're walking the walk. And then it tells you a lot about yourself. We're going to end the lesson this morning. Hopefully it's been beneficial for you. And as we said this morning,